Hello there, game makers! If you want to make or learn programming, you need to understand the basics of a programming language. This is essential stuff to understand. Without that, you won't be going very far concerning if you want to have math and make any progress in making video games. So Yoyo designed a very specific language which is called GML, GameMaker Language. This coding language or programming language is very similar to other ones, so if you learn this one pretty good, you can actually jump to other higher tier languages like Java, C#, JavaScript and God knows other ones, and Python and so on. But here you won't be having the hassle with the class system, because that one is annoying and unnecessarily complicated, but of course it has its advantages as well. But I don't see them because I want to have it easy peasy. So after you have mastered this very short crash course, you will be half a semester further in computer science. So if you pass your test because of me, sweet, you are welcome. So once again, it is super crucial to understand how to read and write code, and this is a must understand. So you have to really stress it. This is very important stuff. So if you ignored most of my videos, didn't watch them to the end, this one, if you are a beginner, you have to, well, get through this, because this is super important. So what are programs or video games? It is in the end a bunch of structured packages, or here objects, and which in general are linked together to construct a cohesive game or program or whatever. So in the end, objects have defined a structure to solve problems. So basically they do something and they solve it, and they are all linked together, and then they create a beautiful program or less beautiful program or a cool video game. So let's go into GameMaker Studio. Of course, you can go with the Godot if you like. There you have your classes and extents and all that stuff. This is for beginners, in my opinion, quite difficult to understand. So I will do another video on Godot vs GML, because or GameMaker Studio, and then, well, I will give my final verdict, because this one has a bigger audience, because, well, it is free. And you can do actually 3D games with it, so let's check it out if it holds to scrutiny. So basically, if you have a game which you see in front of you, you're having objects, so these packages which in total work together to create this beautiful game. So they do two things: they compare and they set and get. This is basically what objects do, and this is the interesting part. So here, if you have those objects, because they are in the end just blueprints, and for example, if you put them into your game, so you can have tons of, I don't know, enemy fighters here. This is the interesting part, so this is not a problem. Then this process is called instantiation, because you don't put the objects inside your runtime, so in your main whatever function, whatever you want to call it, or into your level, because in GameMaker Studio this is just basically your level or your room, doesn't really matter, it is the same. And then these things are not objects, they are then called instances, but they carry the behavior and all the variables and all the well, things which the object have, they have it. For example, let's say I created this object here and then gave it some, I don't know, some values. So it has to fly like this, and it shoots from time to time. Then all those instances, which are basically, let's say, the prints of the blueprint. So basically the kind of the copies, those instances have the same behavior and they all do the same. Therefore, you can create multiple ones or one, it doesn't really matter. So this is how you can do it. So this was a very quick crash course to this. So basically, once again, objects hold values and behaviors, and these values and behaviors, once you put the object into the room, then they are called instances, and they inherit those things. So what is GML? GML is basically in the end a language which has a defined syntax, and that syntax consists of roughly 2 building blocks, which are, for one thing, let's go in here, variables, and for the other thing, operators. And when you use those two together, you can actually create lots of things, and basically these 2 roadblocks or these building blocks do create the whole script, and this can be quite a few. It seems simple and well not too important at the very beginning, but trust me, you can do quite a lot of things with just 2 blocks, and then of course they are being expanded into more and more stuff. So just a little caveat, so in advance, some variables are being reserved because they are part of the system. So for example, some you cannot overwrite and change, but most of them, you can write and name it whatever you like, doesn't really matter. But just a few are reserved for very specific things. And this is the beauty, for example, of GameMaker Studio. If you write something, then you will get, let's go to GameMaker, and then for example, if you write something, you are getting some different kind of colors, and then it will indicate to you what it is. So for example, this word just is signaling to you, okay, this is a variable, and this is, for example, what kind of value it will hold, and the value is a word, and this is a yellowish color. And for example, if it's a constant, then it can be a number because numbers are constants. Or for example, I don't know, if you do the operation, for example, the equals to, or if you want to multiply something with something, so 23 times 23, something like this, then this is the operator. And for example, this is an operator as well. So basically these 2 building blocks, the variables, and then the operators, and then those, and then in the end values, and then they combine together what you actually need to have. So how does that actually look like in GameMaker Studio? So basically what you do, first of all, the variables, they are very important. There are just a few things which are very important to understand. First of all, you need to give it a name. So I call it, I don't know, a variable, and then stick around, then have an operator here, set it to equal, and give it a value. This is very important to understand, because what that thing is doing, GameMaker is reading this part, and then it's going to your, I don't know, your RAM or your hard drive. Basically it will just say like, hey, I need some memory spots, and then it will create a memory spot and will have this memory allocated just for this little variable and for the other ones as well. But for this one you get this very specific spot, and then it will save how it's called plus the value, so it's filled with something, and then it will go to the next line because this is how GameMaker Studio is reading it. Then it's saying, okay, next variable, okay, sweet, give it another memory spot and save the name and the value inside. And what you can do in GameMaker Studio, and this is, for example, different to Java, because Java is type sensitive, but here you can, I don't know, give your, for example, your variable, your banana variable, and then set it to true, or set it to, I don't know, 55 or 51, and then for example you set your banana variable to a value of 51, so to a number. But then you say, hey, I changed my mind, I want to set it to a word which is called word. And then for example, if you see, you need to put it in quotations because this word is officially called a string, but in the end you don't really need to know the syntax for now. So basically this word or the string needs to be put in quotations, and then it has this yellowish color as a color coding. So this is the pretty cool part. And what we just do, we just go from here to here and then rewrite this original variable, which is getting a spot assigned. So it's getting some memory, and then you give it another value. And this is how GameMaker Studio works, because in those objects you have, this is a side note, this is a little bit different in other languages. Here you have a create event, and in this event you assign at the very start what kind of variables you want to have and with what kind of values, and then these things can be used during the runtime, because this is how well a video game works. You are refreshing every second 60 times, so this is where this comes from, and then once in your create event you have established that you want to have those variables, you can later on play around with them because they stick around. And here we come to a very specific thing. For example, sometimes you don't want to create all the time more memory spots, because sometimes you just need to have a variable for one-time use and then you discard it, and then you have this little keyword which is called var. So for example, if you take it away, as you can see, now it has the regular color, but if you go for var, this stands for temporal variable. Then as you can see, I set it to a value which is called delete me, so to a word, because after one time use, so after one step, this is what it's called, it's getting deleted. So these are the most important ones. So you have a variable, then you set it to, I don't know, a number. It can be like this or it can be like this, it doesn't really matter. Of course you cannot make a mishmash of words and numbers, so basically this doesn't work. Of course you can do something like this inside a string, but then it is being written as a string and then those numbers don't actually mean anything, so this is in the end just a word. But here you can have it as a float number or a normal number. For example, here if you would go into JavaScript or no, into Java, then or C#, this wouldn't allow it because you have to be type sensitive. This is what you can do actually in Godot as well. You can have variables and call them whatever you like, and then you have int, then I don't know, I remember, I don't know, 10. This is how it works. You have to define it. Of course you don't have to, because you can this is as it seems a hybrid system where you can do both. You can be type sensitive or not, but here I actually like the dynamic version where it doesn't really matter. But of course the downside is to it, for example, if you use it later on and it was intended, banana was intended as a number, then later on you're checking if this is a number and then you actually have a word in there, then you will get maybe an error. But this is beside the point. So once again, normal variables, temporal variables, and of course you can make constants. I'm gonna skip on that because this is not too important in my opinion. So how is GameMaker Studio, or basically every program, doing this? So they do it sequentially. So that means just line by line it is reading something and taking the instruction. So the first instruction is, okay, there's nothing here, skip it. Then the next thing, okay, variable, operator, assign it to a value. Okay, cool, let's make some memory spot. And then once again, same, then they check it, okay, but this already exists, cool, then just assign it to a new word. Don't make two banana variables, just use the one which already exists and then give it a new value. So here what you can do, and then for example here, this would just mean, if you would read it like this, okay, let's create a new variable and set it to banana, which already exists. So basically we are checking, okay, banana, what kind of value is it having? It has a value which is a string or word, and then you set it to fruit. Here these are a few things which you need to understand. Of course here once again, not very more different than this one, but this one does not live a very long life. And of course here you have a different kind of container, a different kind of data type, which is called array. And arrays are basically like containers which have index numbers, and so basically you can use the same word but with a different kind of index here, so in those brackets. Then basically you have two variables, which is variable multiple entries with the index of 0 and variable multiple entries with the index of 1. And for example here this would be like where are you, paint? So basically we get a spot here and then we get a spot for this dude here and fill it up with a value. Basically the same here, but just, well, so you can create multiple entries because you have the need for this. So this is very primitive way. This is a little bit more advanced. And of course you can have, let's say, not just one-dimensional arrays, you can have 2 dimensions and so on. But let's skip it because we don't need it. And the next part, because what we have done here is basically getting and setting. So if you go back here, for example, this was setting. So here set banana variable to 51, and for example here we would say, okay, set fruit, give it some memory space and get this value which already exists from this guy here. So getting and setting in a nutshell. And the next part is the comparing part, because we don't want just to say like, hey, make some calculations, because this is boring. So what you can do here is, for example, say plus 51 times 31, I don't know, minus 50, and this will work, because in the end what is happening in this line is just an operation, and then it will give you the result of whatever comes out here. And of course you can do this part and this and so on and so on, and minus, or maybe you want to divide it, doesn't really matter. You can actually do some operations with that, because this is in the end what it's doing. We just want to have maybe some values and then we want to do something. But of course these operators don't work on words, because I don't know how you can actually divide word by 2, because I guess it doesn't really exist. So this would throw an error, but if you have numbers, easy peasy, does work, not a problem. So the next thing is comparing, because this is what you do as the second thing besides getting and setting. What is happening here? We're just saying like if, so hey, we set up a condition, and the condition is comparing one thing with another thing, and then with the operator if you see 2 equals. And this is not a setting operation. So here once again the equal signs is setting something, but if you have a double equal, this is comparing. Or for example, if you do something like this, no, something, I don't know, like this, is the banana fruit bigger as the fruit, or is it smaller as the fruit, or is it equal to the fruit, or is it not equal to the fruit? These are once again operators. So the arithmetic ones, I guess these are plus, minus, divided, and what do we have else? Times, and maybe modulo for those guys who actually want to know the hardcore stuff in mathematics. But let's skip that, I don't want to see that anymore. And then those logical operators, which can be, I don't know, equals, not equals, is bigger equals, is smaller equals, come on, now it's bigger equals, or is bigger. As you can see, there are different kind of ways how you can compare those 2 things. And what is in the end happening, it's just checking, hey, is this condition true? So is the outcome a positive thing? So for example, does it make sense? So it, for example here, it would come out as true because this one and this one are, if you compare those 2 values from banana and fruit, they are the same. So you would do the code which is inside. If not, this the computer would skip those lines until here, and then here he would start reading on. This is how it happens. And as you can see, there are those greenish things. These are comments. So for example, if you do those 2 dashes, bam bam, and you write something, the compiler or the GMS code or code reader or whatever you want to call it, he will just skip this line because he's saying, okay, this is green, I don't need this. Or for example, if you want to skip a little bit more, if you don't want to do this well all the time like this, because this could be actually very annoying, you go from one part to, and this is how it works. And the interesting part is, for example, what the compiler would later do, it will compress everything into, let's say, one line, because he will read it like this, because every blank space he will just completely ignore. But of course we do it a little bit different, because while we are human beings and it is easier to make some spaces in between, so it is easier to read for us. And of course make those words, so those variables, readable, because later on you need to understand what banana means, or for example HP or boost or speed or whatever you want to call it. And for example, there are some words which are reserved. For example, if you go for speed, these are variables which are part of the object, and these inbuilt variables you can manipulate, but you cannot reuse them. So for example, this will be always a numerical value, so I don't know, 1 or 20 or whatever you want to put in. But for example, you cannot give it a string. This would throw an error. So they are kind of specific, but this is GMS based. Then if you want to know further, link in the description, inbuilt variables. So once again, what do we have? Well, we have how to read code, how to set up your variables, how you can basically manipulate them and create a new result by operators with arithmetic ones, so just some operations like times, plus and whatever to get a value, or you do it with a logical operation, just checking, hey, is the one the same as the other one, or it's bigger, smaller. Of course this wouldn't make any sense for the human being, but actually GameMaker Studio will check this out, or the compiler will check it out, because computers are in the end kind of stupid and they don't understand that banana and fruit are different things for you than for them, because here they are just abstractions, and this is the important thing to understand. So we got this one done. And what else do we have? So in the end, there are other things which are important to understand, because what you can do is you can create during a runtime, let's call it, I don't know, call it instant, yeah, call it like this, and then instance. Okay, thank you for completely blocking me out. Instance create, as you can see here. And what is this stuff? These are functions, methods, you can call it whatever you like. These are predefined things, well, at least this one, but of course you can make your own. And what they do, they have a very specific purpose, and they are like toolkits to achieve things. For example, this one is creating a new instance into the ROM. For example, what I did, I just put them in here, and then at the start of the game they are already all around. But maybe you want to do this during runtime, or later on create something, I don't know, for example, you want to create an explosion when they die, or you want to create some controllers. Everything which is possible you can do. And here what this thing is doing, and this is then being set to a variable. Here what you get, for example, you press F1, and this is very specific to GameMaker Studio, then it will give you returns, because some scripts actually give you something back, and this is the important thing of methods or functions or whatever. A lot of times they give you something back which you are asking for, and here they will give you back instance ID value, or here real instance. Yeah, so what this is doing, it is giving you an instance ID, and this ID is, for example, a very specific number. And then, for example, this could be one of those two guys here, and then you can actually create it. So here what you are storing there is a reference. So this is basically a link to something. So this is a little bit different than here, because you created an instance, and this instance a little bit bigger, it's packed, and then it's being stored to the variable which you created, and then you can actually control that through this thing, and then you have another operator which is called, well, the dot operator. It looks a little small and neat, and here you can, I don't know, go for speed and then set it to something, whatever you like. And here what we just did is create an instance. Of course you need to fill in those parameters which are in there, so the position and so on. Won't be going into that, this is very specific, and you just need to understand the concept that here we are having a reference, and this reference is controlling this new instance, and then we can go into this specific thing inside, and then with a dot operator grab these things and check out stuff. And the next thing, which could be, well, or is very important, because maybe besides if statements you have switch case, come on, which is being used quite a lot as well. Not gonna go into details, it is similar to this one. This is just basically a selection, it's just checking, hey, if there are, you can have multiple entries where it's just checking some conditions, and if the condition is met, do some code. Gonna skip on this one because hey, we don't need it. Then there is looping, because why not? Maybe you want to check something and you want to repeat it. For that you have while loops, for loops, and then here inside they have a condition as well. So the for loop is a very standard one, so let's call it 0, I is smaller, I don't know, let's go for 12, and then I plus plus. Looks quite complex, but in the end what the thing is doing is just going 12 times through. So basically the compiler is going through here and it's like, here comes a loop, and then we are checking 12 times something which is inside here. So I don't know, let's go for banana equals to, I don't know, fruit. Doesn't really matter because this is just garbage code. And then 12 times we are doing this thing, so checking once, okay, and then we go back and check again and check again, and then we're going in circles, and after those 12 times then we can actually continue. And this is a little problematic because here you can actually do while loops and go for true because this is the condition, and you can for example say, hey, banana is fruit, and now we come into the realm of infinite loops because it's all the time true and our condition is always met. Then we never get out here, we are stuck in permanent looping here, and then of course this thing will throw an error because these are the things which we don't want. So just be careful with the loops because you can create infinite loops, and of course loops are kind of heavy on concerning the operations. So hopefully that gave you a very quick introduction into programming and what you need to understand about reading code. So once again, what you do, set variables, give them value, so this is with the operator, and then here with the operator give it a value, and then do some comparing, do some operations during the runtime. And for GameMaker Studio you do it here in the step event, and I don't know, for example you're just updating the position of your to, I don't know, 5, and this would just mean, hey, we are just going to the right +5 every step, and this is kind of fast because, well, this is quite a lot. So this is part of it, and what you need to understand is this is a thing of practice. You need to see those things a few times more and more and more and more, and at some point you can read it, I don't know, like some foreign language, because this is in the end what it is. So here once again you need to read, and at some point it all makes sense, and then you see those dots and connections and like, this means this means that. But what you need to understand is GML is a language, and languages need to be repeated and repeated and repeated, and at some point they will make sense for you. So this seems a little bit foreign because it's abstract and you're thinking like, what the hell is all that stuff? But once you repeat it a few times, it all makes sense, and then you can, well, make video games with that, because this is what it is. Objects are making your game, and they are controlling everything everywhere. Have a good one. One up, Indie.